Alrighty, men and women, welcome back to our favorite video of the week. Myself and Mr. Lockie Smith, Mr. Scoop de Fuego. I still laugh at that name and how you got it, by the way. But welcome in, Mr. Scoop. We're going to kick it off with our best captaincy options this week, which is going to coincide a little bit with the best options. And we're going to go down the line in terms of price, starting with Damien Cook as our most expensive at $9.19, and we'll work it down from there. So, Lockie, who would you say would be your best captaincy options? Let's go top three this week if you have everyone available.
If I had everyone available, I think Murray has to be very high up there. I mean, he got a lovely 78 last week against a big team. I think with his run home and just in general, he'll be great. But, I mean, yet again, this week he'll be all right. Some guys like Latrell and Cook might be really good too. So I'd probably put Cook up there versus the Warriors, possibly Murray. It's hard to pick a clear third one this week, but I'm really interested in that Rabbitohs game particularly.
Okay, do you think there's some attacking stats available? Or?
I think so. Against the Warriors, they've been a bit better since they've been home, but I reckon Latrell as a very spicy option. Cook and Murray especially will be really, really, really good.
So you're just kind of going to base it off, are you risk on or risk off? Is that what you're thinking? Like Murray and Cookie, like we look at Cookie's, well, Murray's are right here, for example. We've got really some terrific scores, anything over 60 for the last 4 weeks. So you're looking at a bit more consistency. And then someone like Cookie, you've got really the last time he got you got 2 scores under 60 really for all the way until round 2. So consistency there and 70s and 80s on a pretty regular basis, right? Which is pretty cool. So
yeah,
I personally think he's the best option.
He played the Warriors.
Yeah, definitely say he's the best option for me. Sorry, go again.
Sorry, what was that? Yeah, last time he played the Warriors, he went over for a try, got a 70. Might not quite get as much work as compared to a big team, but plenty of chance for attacking stats. And as you can see, he's just so many 70s, 60s, and 80s. He's just one of the top clear options if you're going to swap Cleary out this week and have got a little bit of cash.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing, right? If we're looking at Cookie, he's the best option to bring in. He's also the best option by far in his position. So I personally think he's the most the guy that you really need to target. If you have the 3 halves, or if you can play it where you've got Burton or Hines and you have enough cover in the center or the wing fullback, and that would give you the 3 halves, for example. Then you could go for someone like Cook. I would do that if you have the extra cash, but that might mean you need to make 2 trades, right? Which could very much be a difficult way to go about it. So Cook by far the best option in just terms of the trade out to Cleary. But then what's Cleary's price? 835 is he? Something like that.
I think he dropped quite a bit.
835. I think you have to go up 3K to get to Murray, I think. So if you don't have a look at that, I'll just briefly talk about the next bunch of guys. So in terms of guys that are very close to Cleary's price, we have Tarpanay at 859. We have DCE 842, and then Murray at 835. And it drops off a fair bit from there with guys like Munster, who could be a solid option. So out of these next 3, do we think Tarpanay is a solid captaincy option? Does he come into anyone's radar if you do own him? There's not a lot that do, but I think a bunch of people will pick him up this week if they have that cover in the halves.
I mean, I think he's, especially with that second really big score, he's shown that he can be consistent. I think we mentioned the other day, he hasn't scored below 50 since like round 11 or 12. And when he's got those 50s, he's also got that massive ceiling that he's shown recently. So I think he's personally a pretty good captaincy option. Maybe not as safe and consistent as a Murray or a Cook, but he is potentially one of those game winners. If you really need someone to win you this head-to-head finals matchup, now that we're starting those this week, Tarpanay is one of those game-breaking guys who can win it for you if you need somebody.
That's definitely something to think about, isn't it? When you're getting into those finals and you can see the team that your opponent has, and you're like, okay, well, how you would look at it as well, guys, is if you've got, just say, most teams are fairly similar, so you might have 5 or 6 differences. You go, will my players outscore his? And if you don't think that they will be able to on a consistency or an average basis, then it might be something like that where you go for that little bit of a risk that could get you that 90, because he does have two of them, of recent time, one in round 14 there and then round 20. So he didn't even have to score a try in that round 14 one. And they come up against Penrith, which is, he's going to have to step up, right? But it'll be interesting to see how Penrith bounce back in this week, considering Cleary is out. So yeah, definitely a solid option. Yeah. Obviously one of the more expensive guys that you could select, but a solid one. And if you had that extra 30k, would you go Cleary to Tarpany, or would you go Cleary to Haas and leave a little bit of cash for potentially another trade in the next week or two?
I think it depends on the judiciary tonight. I think Harrigan's going to be out for quite a while, so I would say probably go to Haas, because if you don't have him, I think you will be hurting. If you already have Haas, I think Tarpany is a brilliant option to go for.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So 724, and what we've got out of him in the last few weeks, obviously, is an 83 with a try. He had big minutes last week, and that's probably the biggest thing that I'm interested in, is that when he does play those big minutes, he gets huge scores. So we've got, in round one, a 70-minute effort for 85. We've got 72 minutes, 70, and 68 for 78, 71, and 64. So anytime he gets those big ones close to that 70 mark, he does get huge scores. The only one he's got a little bit of a lower one with 65 minutes, he got a 56. So at worst, that's kind of what we're looking at from now on, and you're getting him at price of 51. So he's definitely someone that could average over 60 for the rest of the time and at a cheaper price. So the other thing, maybe if you do go down from Cleary to Haas, just say you had 20k in the bank, you go down to Payne Haas, you get that extra about 130 to use on a potential other trade. If you're sitting with it with 5 or 6, there are still a few people with a bunch in the bank, then you could upgrade one of those 600k guys to a 750 guy that's on a bit more of a roll than one of the guys you're kind of just holding on to that's averaging like close to 50. The Taumalolos, the what McInnes was doing, for example, those types of guys. I find that pretty interesting. Would you do the similar thing, Loggy?
Yeah, I'd agree. If you have Cleary and a guy that around that 600k mark, like, I don't know, maybe a Josh Jackson that you want to turn into a real gun. If you go to Payne Haas and there's in that 700k price bracket, there's not a heap other than Payne Haas, but the guys like Munster, Tedesco are more easily able to be gotten if you go down to a Haas plus one of those 600k guys.
Yeah, it's a good call. And then another one we had in there, we'll speak about Munster in a second, but was Adam Reynolds at 705, so he's obviously a solid one as well at that decent price, but nothing over the top. Obviously coming off a couple of 3 good games in a row now, 53, 83, and 51, but again, don't expect the world from him. You probably expect some consistency now that it looks like he's recovered. He did play the 69 minutes on the weekend, but generally it looks like he's recovered and he's back to that consistency. So you're looking at a 50-ish on a general week to week, and then potentially a 70. Is that what we're looking at with Reynolds? Maybe a 55 average over the rest of the time, like he already has the whole year?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. He's in the same ballpark as somebody like Jamal Fogarty, but Fogarty, as we've seen, can score you 30, 50, and 70 in consecutive weeks. Reynolds will be that more consistent type of guy if you don't have enough to go up to, say, a Munster, or if you don't have DCE for some reason at the moment.
Yeah, cool. We'll talk about Munster now, who's got there at 777. I had a couple of people ask me if I have Jerome Hughes already, is it bad to have Hughes and Munster? What do you think, Locke?
I think not necessarily, because I think Munster will score pretty well regardless of what Hughes does, because he has most of the year. I think the problem is more having Hughes as opposed to as a keeper, as opposed to having both of them, because Munster is clearly the better option out of the two.
This year, that's for sure. He's been killing it, hey? That's 60 average, that's a tad higher than what he has of recent year, and especially with the lack of tackle bust numbers for him and drop in the kick meters as well. He's he obviously gets better and better every year, doesn't he? So he's someone as well that you probably could bring into your side, but not look to captain him. He does have that little bit of a streaky side as well, but also looks very similar to what something like Reynolds looks like, to be honest with you. There's a bunch of 50s in there, and then could get the 70 odd as well. So yeah, Munster I think is a very safe and solid option as well. And the biggest thing here is that they're going to need him and Hughes to do well. Or the whole team's going to need to do well to get themselves in a decent position on the ladder, right? This is not what they've...
Yeah, I think so. Look, guys, Munster is one of the only players who scores significantly higher against high-ranked teams like top 4 teams than he scores against weaker teams than most other players. He's the opposite in regards to that compared to someone like Mitch Moses, who's more of a flat-track bully in terms of fantasy scoring. And you can see those last 4 matches, they're deadly. Penrith, Broncos, Roosters, Para. Now, with the Storm being in such disarray with injury, I won't say with any certainty that will continue because there's a bit of disruption. But Munster is that big game player to step up in those big games and score those stats, and they will need him in order to try and crack back into that top 4. So I can see a world where Munster chugs along and averages 50 because the Storm aren't doing amazing, but there's also one where he can average 65 because he just steps up so much against those big teams when they need him to.
Yeah, it's just going to be interesting how it ends up, right? We're going to be going out on a little bit of a limb, selecting one of these guys, and there's always like 1 or 2 guys that average that 65, 70 for the run home, and the other just chugs along and gets 50. So there's obviously going to be a little bit of luck in it, but again, even just looking back on previous years could be a little bit of interesting study as well, if you guys wanted to do that and see where they were on the ladder, and if that actually plays much of a part, could be a little bit of interesting study for you as well. But yeah, we spoke about all those guys. We've got Cam Murray, obviously the best mid. That's the biggest thing, guys. Just looking at who the best options in each position are, and do you have the majority of them? If you don't, look to try and shore that up this week, and making 2 trades to do a mini downgrade from Cleary to get a top gun in 2 positions could be pretty cool. We didn't really speak about DCE, but do we think they're going to be okay now that they've got their players back? He should be able to get back to those bigger scores rather than the 50 and 53?
I think there's a very good chance he'll go back to normal. There is a chance that, a bit like, dare I say it, the Dragons barbecue last year, after that big incident, they all just kind of fell down a hole and did nothing for the rest of the year. I think Manly, there's a little bit of a danger of that happening in DCE being dragged down with it, but I think he should be, if not as good as he's been going, still a heavily one of the best options and a high 50s average at the very least.
Yeah, it's been a weird 2 weeks for him, and I suppose with them still in the hunt for finals, he's going to have to step up, I think, anyway. I see it as a different situation for the Dragons, but it will be very interesting if that actually has caused some issues in the club, for example. Who knows? We will find out, won't we? But you saw the games before that, 77, 70, and 88. So he's captaincy option before that. And I still think he's a decent one this week. And even, you want to stick simple with guys like Nicho Hynes, like he's still going to be a great captaincy option. There are a lot of options this week, whether you're looking at Cook, Tarpany, Murray, Hynes. I even think, Hynes probably has a chance of scoring better and being a little bit safer than Murray is, personally. I think he can be more of that 65 guy, whereas Murray I can see like a 58 as a pretty standard one, unless he's playing that 80 minutes, which happens, every second week, let's say on average. But yes, very interesting for those options there. We've got a few more interesting ones to go. We spoke obviously a little bit about Adam Dewey of recent weeks, but we'll go to him now, just because I brought him up, and then we've got a few other options in that position there. So Adam Dewey, 5'6'9" there is the interesting one. He obviously coming off a big score last week. How do we think the situation with Brooks being out and Madden being in helped Adam?
I think it probably helps him much more than it would hinder him, because Jackson Hastings was one of those guys, no matter where he was on the field, he would get his hands on the ball a lot, which means it's not in Dewey's hands. With both those senior players out and Madden in, he has to take over more, stand up, a little bit like Dylan Brown now has to, now that Mitch Moses is out and Jake Arthur's in the halves.
Very true.
I think Adam Dewey is set to soar from now on with taking over the main playmaking and the main senior half. Beside Madden, I think those 70s aren't going to be as irregular as they have been previously. I think they're going to come a bit more often now.
Those kick meters you saw on the weekend went up a little bit. Madden's are about the 150 mark, so that is back.
And the Tigers have been doing well too. They've competed hard with 2 top 4 teams in consecutive weeks. It's really interesting. If they keep playing well, the sky's the limit for Dewey. I mean, it's hard to say with any certainty that he's going to outscore most of the other wing fullback guns who we certainly going to average that way. But he's got certainly improved his ceiling in recent weeks.
Yeah, and as you said, the Hastings injury, I think, just all but assures him of having the focal point and the biggest role that you can possibly have in a team that isn't amazing around him. But I will say we have to give the props where they're due. They have been playing great, and they do come up against the Knights this week. So Dewey, if you also want a sneaky captaincy option, could be that man as well if you want to pop him in there. I would personally probably pick him as captain over Latrell, but that's why we have two of us on here, right? A little bit of debate.
Yeah. Before last week, I would have said Latrell, but two lower scores in a row, we've seen that he is that up and down scorer. He can score you a 90 and then a 38. Dewey's, now that he's playmaking, I think his floor's gone up and his ceiling's gone up a good 5 or 10 points just from being the senior half and having less people take those responsibilities off him.
Yeah, but still go out on a limb, and because Latrell, there is a 90 somewhere or 100.
There is a 90. If you need that head-to-head win for this first finals matchup, Latrell can get you that.
Yeah, but he could lose it for you too. But there's some risky people playing this game, right? So I just wanted to talk about Holmes as well. He's had an electric month. Obviously up the Cowboys as well. Great win on the weekend. But 66, 50, 76, and 72. And that's in and around Origin as well. So he's come back absolutely firing since that Game 3 win. Bloody Maroons. Anyway, he's kicking goals as well, right? We're scoring plenty of tries on a weekly basis, the Cows are. They come up against the Dogs this week, which will be interesting. So do you see him as a solid option to pick up as well if you wanted to go his way? Or we kind of feel like we're chasing points a little bit with Holmesy?
I had my eye on him for a little bit, but left it too late to bring him in unless I do something now. I think he's genuinely a very good option for the run home because they do have some softer games. They've got a couple of them out of the way. It's not as easy now. As you can see, they've got the Roosters and then Penrith, but they've also got the Warriors and the Bulldogs as well. So he's got a couple of games where he can go. I think he's not as attractive now, but because of a certain guy named Owen Aitken, who's named back in the centres this week and scaring us, if you can go to a Holmes and have got plenty of trades like 5 or 6, Holmes is a very good option to bring in at this time with Aitken falling out of favour.
Do you go Manu over Holmes? I didn't pop him in there today, but a little bit more expensive. Do you pick him up even at centre?
4 points, yes. But it's so hard. He's been given license to roam, but he's one of the most expensive players in the whole game now. It's very hard to. I think he might even have cracked 800. I'll just check. Manu 824k. That's premium.
Holy moly.
It's Murray price. I think
shit.
You can probably afford to try a Holmes rather than going up to a Manu if you don't have him now. I think there's safer guys than you can bring in than Manu. Yeah,
okay. I think that's fair. That's very expensive for an outside back. Yes, he can go big, but he can also get 31 in the centres. So, O'Sullivan. A few people have been talking about him. There's just an easy straight swap, and we've seen he's obviously averaged 52.3 in his time this year, and that includes 6 games. So, would you look to him at that awkwardish price of 639, or do you let's just say you strictly need a half? Would you be interested in going down to him as a straight swap? I personally wouldn't do it. Let's just go straight off. If you have just the one trade, I'd go straight to one of the top guns. That's pretty clear. But if you wanted to use that extra cash, would you do the double trade and upgrade elsewhere and get O'Sullivan?
I think I probably wouldn't. There's just a little bit too much uncertainty with both Luai and Cleary gone. That weakens them a lot. If it was just one of them and O'Sullivan was in there as well, I think the Penrith team will take a hit, and how much it will be is hard to say. How O'Sullivan will score in a not quite usual halves pairing, it's hard to say. His price is a little bit cheaper than some guys, but it's also only, 31k below a Fogarty, or only 60 or 70k behind a Reynolds, which will be one of those guys that'll definitely give you the 50s, whereas O'Sullivan should do okay, but it's a lot harder to say for sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, just if you look at his stats straight out, he's someone that does get a fair bit of base. Like, he's had one game where he's missed a bunch of tackles, but generally he's in the low to mid 20s on tackles for 1 to 2 misses, and 350 kick meters on average. Runs the ball a bit. The odd try, assist, and try. So he definitely covers all bases, and you can see even though they lost last week, he was still able to score 60. So he's definitely solid, but I completely agree with what you're saying as well. But yeah, I just had heaps of people ask me about that one. I thought that was interesting when there's so many other options. And if you don't have, like, I'd be going Dewey over him. But obviously if you have a bunch of those guys, then would also mean you probably have enough cover in the halves, and you could go for a better player personally that it could average maybe 55, 60 in another position for sure. All right, I spoke about Dewey. We have two blokes to talk about, or three we'll talk about. You want to talk about Dykes just quickly for Sharkies? Do you know much about him? Have you seen much?
No, I haven't seen a lot about Dykes. I can pull up his stats a bit while I talk. I was more interested to see if it was going to be Lachlan Miller. Lachlan Miller's only in the halves for fantasy, but he is... he scored that 67 in that 1 week, and we know that now with Kennedy out for 4 to 5 weeks, he'll be really, really... if it was Miller, we would be really, really interesting. I expect that Dykes will do better than Kennedy, and at 220k, if you need 2 trades to get to a gun, he's definitely an interesting guy to bring in. I would have preferred it to be Miller, but Dykes is quite interesting due to his price point.
Yeah, I know. I saw Rugby League Guru spoke about him in pre-season. Just brought up another post just this afternoon saying that he was excited to see him debut. So I as I said, don't know much about him, but personally, I would have been like, I feel like he's probably more of the Kennedy mold, whereas Miller's more of a runner, and that's maybe why they went that. Just they want to keep that same style of play before Kennedy comes back. So again, more of a ball player. Defensive kind of guy, whereas Lockie's obviously transitioning from Union, and yeah, definitely a great runner of the ball, but it doesn't suit their style as much, is why they didn't go with him. So anyway,
okay,
interesting one. Sorry.
Oh yeah, keep going. I'll chime in after.
Cool. I'm done.
Okay, yeah, I've just pulled up his stats from the Jets in reserve grade New South Wales Cup stuff. He does have a reserve grade average of about 50, so he does look like he is one of those guys who can score well at the back, rather than a solid guy who doesn't really fill out the stats sheet like Kennedy. Kennedy will give you those 30s, but he'll also go missing according to fantasy, even though he's a solid enough fullback. Dykes looks a little bit like Miller, like he might be able to score well. Average running meters 130. He looks like a solid option, especially for a cash down at this stage of the year if you need to make 2 trades.
Easy. Someone that I'm semi-interested in, I'm probably not going to pull the trigger myself, but I can see it working out pretty well, is Alex Seyfarth. So he looks like he's going to get a decent crack at this edge position for the Tigers. And we see that when he does play 80 minutes in an edge role, he's got a 54, a 59, 41, and the big 71 last week. So definitely a great one. He didn't even score a try last week. He did have the try assist there, but 50 tackles for 1 miss. He's definitely a workhorse. You see he's got 47, 49 tackles in that role, and just a 36. So a bit of a lower game there with a couple of penalties as well. So he's definitely, if at that real cheap price, if you need to, I think I'm thinking more of him as a guy that if you're struggling in your 17th player and you're playing someone that's like a 350k guy, and you can maybe straight swap them and get 15 to 20 extra points from your number 17, whether it's a Booth, for example, who's not scoring so well. Seyfarth could be that kind of player that you chuck in to get a better 17th. So rather than upgrading a 50-point guy to a 65-point guy, you're upgrading your 30 average scorer to a 45, or a 25 to a 40. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Even swapping someone like Kennedy, like we were talking before, mid-300s to another mid-300s, I know who I'd prefer to be scoring in my 17 if they're going to play the full game.
Yeah, and I suppose the other positive is we do have someone like Polle this week who gets his opportunity to play in the 13 role, and probably means 45 to 50 minutes. I was having a little analysing him in the team list video there a little bit. And you see here he's got a 48-minute effort and a 42-minute effort for an average of between the 2 games of 38 and a half there. So again, it's one of those guys that you might, if you relying on someone like Booth, who has hit a 28 and a 14 the last 2 weeks, and maybe Polle's going to be a little bit more consistent if he does manage to keep that starting role with them having so many players out. And they've got 2 youngsters, debutants on the bench, I'm not exactly sure as well. So minutes might come his way a little bit. So he's definitely someone interesting. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, when I saw that he was going to be, I thought it would benefit off of Gary more, Hastings' injury, but now that he's into the 13, I really like Paul. I don't know what he'll really score, but I think that mid-30s, 40s will definitely be his sort of what you'll be expecting as his floor from scoring in when he's starting from now on.
Yeah, you're probably happy with a 40, right, if he hits that in 45, 50 minutes. So I didn't actually check it out, but Seyfarth's playing these big minutes on the edge. What's going on? We've lost Lucy, obviously. What's the new one? We've got Kelmer playing, and who else is playing? Oh, Garner's out. Do we know how long he's out for? I saw it said he's out for at least another week, but that's my main worry.
According to Casualty Ward, Garner is back next week. He's got a neck issue, apparently. Yeah. So it's hard to say whether he'll stay there for forever, but he'll give you a really good score this week if he. Yeah,
that's the
with
worry.
With those debutants at the bench, I think.
That's the big worry with Seyfarth. So, yeah, and he probably doesn't take Kelmer's position, but he's been playing pretty well. So, yeah, definitely a big risk on Seyfarth. Obviously, if it's a neck issue for Garner, it could linger, but overall, bit of a scary pickup if you went for Seyfarth. That's why I was like, I probably won't be doing it, but it sounds cool because he's gonna have it. You watch him have a 55 week or something like that. So.
A bit like Hosking scoring those really good scores before disappearing and wishing you had them but can't jump on.
Yeah, it was amazing. That's pretty much it, I reckon. Is there anything else you wanted to mention? Anyone we might have missed? Any strategy for the last few weeks, considering majority of people will be using their trades the next this week or next?
I think unless you are very blessed with trades, we've seen perfect example of how disaster can strike. Pappenhausen happened a couple of weeks ago. Now Cleary's gone. If you're down to a couple of trades, I would not be going down to 0 under any circumstances, basically, because something like Cleary might happen again. I know personally a couple of people in my league are down to 0 trades and have a Cleary and a Carrigan. So they're completely ruined for head-to-head finals now and overall in general. So if you have only 1 or 2 left, after you've got rid of Cleary, don't try and go chasing people. You will need that one almost certainly for something that goes wrong in those last month.
Yeah, and if you're playing head-to-head too, which a lot of people are, right? Like you're talking about your leagues, you need to at least keep something because, you want to try and win those leagues. And if everyone's sitting, whoever's sitting with 0, you're going to have that one person that's been safe with their trades and kept 3 or 4, which we speak about all season, will come over the top of you right at the end. And same with your overall rank. You could be sitting there at a 1,000 overall, and if you get down to 0 very quickly, you could go out to a 3, 4, 5,000 if you're sitting there with Cleary, that kind of bank on your bench. So again, even if that is the case, it's something to learn off. And I know I'm getting a lot of people that are joining this community that are new to fantasy, first or second year. So it's all learning. I'm learning plenty each and every year. I've played for about 15 years, so it's a fun game. It's a tough game, but it's a fun game, right?
Yeah, I think for strategy-wise, things like Aitken being named in the centres are probably bad for his fantasy scoring, but unless you have that 4 or 5 trades, you just have to cop it or potentially loop him with a collar or something like that.
Yeah.
He's going to score well enough that it's not an absolute disaster like Cleary or Pappenhausen, and you'll just have to hold that trade.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think, no more marginal upgrades, right? Unless you've got, 5 probably, 4 max. You can use 2 maybe this week to get it down to 2. But other than that, there's no real marginal upgrades, I don't think. So, yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Scoop, for being on here. Appreciate your help and expert knowledge. We call you an expert now.
Thanks, Jamie. Good luck to everybody. Their big decision this week. This will be a big defining moment. I mean, don't agonize over it too much, but it is an important switch that you need to make clear to another gun. I hope this video has helped you out with making some of those decisions and the thought processes behind them. So good luck this week.
Good stuff. Yeah, don't agonize too much, but it's only life or death, all right? So come out and get 1 this week, you will die. All right, guys. Love yous all. We'll catch you in the next few videos. See you later.